Hi, I'm Johnny Logan and I support Ireland AM mental health campaign. It's time to talk.
Thank you to Eurovision winner Johnny Logan for supporting our Time to Talk mental health campaign. Now, Gareth O'Callaghan is one of Ireland's best known radio broadcasters, but during his time in the BBC and RTE, he was hiding something that not only affected him, but also the people closest to him, a battle with depression.
Now, Sinead recently caught up with Gareth as part of Ireland AM's Time to Talk mental health campaign as he chatted about his struggle with mental illness. Here's how they got on.
Gareth, thank you so much for joining me this morning, and I'm thrilled that you are part of Ireland AM's mental health series Time to Talk.
My pleasure.
Because you were talking about your issues with mental health over 10 years ago at a time when nobody else was talking about it, so we salute you for doing that.
Thank you.
I know it's probably something you don't want to be saluted for, but it is a big deal, talking about it back then and talking about it now. And I wanted to ask you, because I've interviewed quite a few people during this series, whether there was an individual event which was the catalyst to you experiencing depression or mental health battles, or whether depression and battles with mental health has been something that's dogged you all your life, whether as the black dog it has flitted in and out of your life, it's been part of who you are. And you might not fall into one camp or the other, everybody's journey is their own. But for you, when was your first memory or experience of thinking, okay, well, this is tough for me, I'm finding life harder than the average person is?
Oh God, that's a good question. Interesting. All these years on, when I'm asked that question again, I still have to think, because I suppose it's always been there, a little bit like a soft breeze, coming up from behind. It's on your shoulder. Some day it's a bit of a cold chill. Other days it's fine. And I think it goes way, way back. As far back as I can remember, I think, whenever the memory clock, the time when I can remember things, I think it was switched on in me about 4.5. I've no recollection before that.
I know you're a survivor of abuse as well, but you don't pinpoint that. That's not at the core of your mental health problems.
No, it's not. I mean, it's part of my history. It's there. It's part of a period in my life which I have come to terms with. And I've learned so much from that, and I think I've become so much stronger as a result. And I think, thankfully, I've been able to help other survivors come through very, very, very torturous times like that. But no, Sinead, I think when we pinpoint something like this sort of into the whole area of abuse, it takes the greater picture away from the umbrella, which is depression.
So do you think you would have had your battles with depression whether the abuse had happened or not?
Yes.
You do? Okay,
yes,
yeah,
I do.
yeah.
I do.
So it's a completely separate issue.
Yeah, very much so.
So you then, music became such a big part in your life, obviously. Completely, it became, I suppose, the centre of your life. Yeah. And you went off to England and you had this fabulous career and you were being successful and carrying on up the ladder. Went into the BBC and then came home, landed the huge gig here. So life was good, lovely wife, lovely daughters, everything is sweet. But at the same time, you then plunge into the darkest of darkest times. Yeah,
everything was perfect. I got the gig in the BBC. I was working for BBC Radio 2. I was only 25 years of age and I had my own weekend show on Radio 2.
That's huge.
I was too young to appreciate it. Yeah. It was difficult being in England at that time in the mid-80s and being an Irishman in a very high-profile position, because obviously the terrorism headlines were making the front pages and they were making the news bulletins every hour, every day. And I decided halfway through the 80s then to turn my back on England and come home, because there was lots happening here. Yeah. Kevin Healy, who had just become the head of RTE Radio, was changing Radio 2 into 2FM and rang me and said, look, want you to move in here. And I couldn't believe this. I thought this was the greatest thing that could happen to me. This was even bigger for me than the BBC. At the time, I'd just got married. We had a beautiful baby on the way who's now 24 years of age. And
how the years have flown, Gareth.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, everything was perfect. But all this time, there was an undercurrent there. I wouldn't even call it a darkness. There was a kind of a sinister feeling that all's not well within.
And were you just locking that away and ploughing on?
Yeah.
in the background this sinister feeling that you couldn't shake?
There was this feeling that there were days when I wanted to go home and I wanted to put a blanket over my head and I wanted to go into a room and close the door and scream.
Did you express that to anyone?
No.
Even your wife?
I think Jackie saw this, it creeping up on me. And I think there were days then it began to really take over in the late 1990s, which would be about 15 years ago. It really began to accelerate and it really began to show. And, you know, as one of my friends said, there's something wrong with you, you're aging before your time.
When you say it began to accelerate and began to show, give me the details. What do you actually mean by that? What was your life like back then?
I didn't need to go into the quiet room with the blanket over my head. I couldn't keep it at home. I couldn't keep it private. I stopped going out. I began to forget things, which was when I thought I was seriously ill. I began to lose a huge amount of weight.
You were dying, didn't you?
Yes, I did at one stage. I actually thought I had some sort of terrible, terrible illness.
Did you want out at any stage, Gareth? Did you contemplate ending your life?
Yes, I did. I was on the breakfast show at that stage, which suited the strange metabolism inside me, because I obviously people who are very, very low will wake very early in the morning. So that kind of suited me. I would wake, I didn't need a clock. I would just get up and I would go to work and I would throw myself into the breakfast show and I would be consumed by what was needed to be done. But then, my producer at that stage knew what was going on, and I had sort of confided in her and I said, look, there's something really badly wrong with me. I don't know what it is and I'm afraid. And I would go home some mornings and the house would be quiet, and I remember thinking, I could stop all this now. You know, I could stop this horrible, horrible torture. I was being like electrocuted inside. I don't know what it was. It was like as if something inside me was on fire and I couldn't put the fire out, and I couldn't get inside and scratch the itch, and I couldn't figure out why I was feeling this way, and it just seemed to get worse and worse and worse. And the idea of everything just going black and quiet was very appealing. I didn't like the idea of pain, and I didn't know what the pain of killing myself would be like, and I sometimes think it's why I didn't entertain the idea too seriously and take it on head to head. But there were days that I would think about the belt around my trousers and stories I'd heard and other people who had died, and I would think, no, I couldn't do that. You know, what if someone I loved found me? What if I destroyed their life? My life was slowly unraveling, but why do that to anybody else? And it was a kind of a strange coincidence of events. My wife hurt her back, couldn't move, she'd been gardening, and I rang the doctor, who I just didn't want to go near because I knew the minute he saw me he'd say, come here. And I hadn't seen my GP, Michael, for a few years at that stage. Stupid man, go to the doctor.
You're not alone in that.
No, I know.
You're not alone.
I know. And I've learned my lesson. But he came up to the house, which is very rare that he would have time to come up to the house. But once again, I don't believe in coincidences anymore. He turned up 15 minutes later with his bag, and you know, he had that sort of cheerful smile on his face, and I opened the door and the smile dropped. And I said, thanks for coming up. And he said, how are you? I said, I'm okay, I'm very tired. And he said, don't you move, I want to have a chat with you. I'll see the patient first. So he came back down and we closed the door and we sat and talked for about 45 minutes, and by the end of the conversation, he wanted me to go to hospital. He wanted me to check in for a little while, take a break, as they say, you know.
So that night when that doctor sat there and said, I need you to take a break, were you like, yeah, I need a break? Were you?
No, I was just glad that he realised that I was in hell, and I was glad to be able to admit it, but I couldn't take time off work because...
Well, you chose not to.
I chose not to. I was self-employed. If I didn't go to work, I didn't get paid. Like every family, you know, there were bills to be paid.
But was also work not the one space where that pain vanished?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And I was afraid that if I let that go, I was afraid if I stepped out of that little spotlight into a place where I had too much time to think, it would completely swallow me up and it would kill me. So I kept going, and I was like a car running with no water in the radiator. It was horrible. But at that point, I started taking antidepressants.
Did you do so willingly? Were you like, yeah, whatever?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, this GP said to me, these will make you feel better. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And this was like, you know, the chocolate bar wrapped in the golden ticket.
Everything
in
will
the
be
Willy
fine
Wonka
if I just
film.
take these tablets. Yeah.
Everything
how
will
did
be
that work?
okay. Well, I didn't realise there was a 6-week kick-in period to them, so the 6 weeks was still hell. But then things started to change. I kind of began to realise that, hold on a minute, the sun's actually still shining, you know. Well, look at there's a bit of blue sky there. And I began to take an interest in things again. I began to read newspapers, not just for work, but for pleasure.
Okay. So you turned a tiny corner.
I turned a tiny corner, but it was only a tiny corner, because what I realised, and I realised it quite quickly, was that, okay, I had reached a level of, what's this they call it, mechanical functionability. I was able to function, but I still just felt like a bit of an old machine. This horrible blackness was still there, but I was able to override it slightly.
Okay.
It was like,
but in a robotic way.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've improved the reception slightly, folks, but you can still hear that horrible hiss in the background. So that was still there. And it was at a stage, as you said earlier on, it was at a time where no one talked about this. You couldn't go and Google stuff because, you know, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, there was so little out there that was happening. People who were writing books were psychiatrists, scientists.
They certainly weren't successful and in the public eye.
Yeah. You know, and if you want to go reading philosophy books, that's fine, but they don't tell you about you. And I was dying to find out what the hell is happening to me, what's gone wrong with me. Where did this come from? You know, why isn't everybody else falling apart? And of course, when I look back now, I realise that loads more people were falling apart.
Hi, I'm Paddy Mulligan.
And I'm Shane Bourne.
And we support Ireland AM's Time to Talk
mental health campaign.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brent Pope, and I support Ireland AM's Time to Talk mental health campaign.
Of course, that was rugby pundit Brent Pope supporting this week's Time to Talk campaign.
I want to say a huge thank you to Brent for the interview that he did that ran the other day, because we got a huge response to it and he did a wonderful job, so thank you, Brent. Before the break, Gareth O'Callaghan discussed his struggle with depression, and here is the second part of that interview.
I'm good. I'm content with myself. I have an inner peace. Some days I don't have an inner peace. Some days I get that agitated feeling again. You know, I think a lot of people who read my book said, he's cracked it, he's cured, let's find out what he's got. He's bottled it, so let's see if we can buy it. That's not the case. I still have awful days. I still have days when I can barely drag myself out of bed. I mean, I was out...
Do you deal with those days differently now? What's changed? Because something's changed.
Something has changed, and I think what happened last year to me, in the middle of last year, I crashed. I didn't think it was going to happen that badly again, but then I'd taken my eye off the ball. I'd taken my eye off my regime. You know, so you've got to constantly keep stock taking. Let what you don't need go. Let what you need stay and bring more of it in. And I stopped doing that. And I was very worried about a business that I had been involved in, and I knew it was coming to an end, and it collapsed. And I lost everything last year. And that was the real test for me. I lost absolutely everything. I realised I was penniless. I had lost all my savings. The money I had invested was gone, and I owed a fortune. I still do owe a fortune, and it's not a nice feeling.
I'm not sure whether listening to another person's advice helps when you're in the horrors, but what would you say to somebody watching right now who is in those darkest of days, who is walking into the Phoenix Park screaming themselves? What do they do?
I'm very conscious of platitudes, and I'm very conscious of saying things like be strong. It's very difficult to be strong when you're worried about putting food on the table, and when you're worried about the man who knocks on the door looking for the rent, or when you're worried about the revenue commissioners threatening to take this off you and threatening to take you to court, and you want to pay the money and you're giving them everything you can, and you just don't have the money they want, but they're not sitting back waiting for it. They're practically prepared to drive a bulldozer through your life to get it. First of all, when I feel these things, I know I'm not alone. I know there are people I know who are also going through it. To feel like pulling the plug on your life it's actually not a rare thing. I believe a huge percentage of people have experienced that feeling and that wonder. Would it all go away? Would the darkness, would the finality of it bring peace to me because I wouldn't have to worry about the bills? It definitely brings a finality with it. There's never ever any coming back. You're beyond reach forever. No one knows if we'll ever see people again. But what I would urge people who are feeling very, very, very lost and empty and spent to do is just to step back from that. I try this thing called dissociation, where I try to dissociate myself. I detach myself from the problem, and I try to look in on it and imagine if I can just park that problem just over there a little bit and step back and remain where I am now, it can't hurt me. I don't feel as threatened by it anymore. And I urge other people to do that.
So try and hang on to that.
You've got to hold on.
What's around you at the moment, and see what's valuable around you at the moment.
You've got to hold on, and you also have got to understand that you're not alone. That I read somewhere recently that there's always someone thinking of you. Every second of every day, someone somewhere thinks about you. You cross the mind of someone somewhere. And
someone who loves you, chances are.
Someone who loves you, because that's the only reason they're thinking of you. Unless, of course, you do owe them money, in which case, they'd love you to pay them, but you can't do that. But I think the people who love you, their world becomes a darker, emptier place without you. So we owe it to them because we love them equally as much.
To hold on.
To hold on and to be here and to be present with them. Because remember, the experience we're going through now, they may have to face into at some stage. So what we learn from what we're being grilled by now will help them to get through it. And they will be the first people to come to you in days to come because they will have seen you come through it. They'll be proud that you came through it, and we will come through it.
Gareth, I think that's a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much for telling me everything you've told me this morning.
My pleasure.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so
Likewise.
much. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Sinead. Thank you.
Huge thank you to Gareth. We actually talked for about an hour and a half, and we could have run the entire thing. It was remarkable again, and thank you, Gareth, for your honesty and just choosing to speak out, because it does make a huge difference. And also thank you to the Marker Hotel in Grand Canal Square for letting us film Gareth's interview there. Now let's leave you with another sports personality who supports this week's campaign.
Hi, I'm Annalise Murphy. It's time to talk. I support Ireland AM's mental health campaign.